In prison, you live for that moment. You live for day to day.
Suge Knight isn't doing so good behind bars. Word is he was just attacked. And apparently it's all tied to the bombshell revelations he's been dropping on his podcast. I've got all the details. Let's break it down. Suge Knight faces prison attack. Something wild's been floating around the streets and social media for a minute now, and it's news of Suge Knight getting attacked in prison. When we talk about real ones in the hip-hop game, Suge Knight's name comes up every single time. This cat wasn't just some industry suit pushing papers. He was the guy who used to have grown men shaking in their boots. The one signed artist and put them in the spotlight. Now that same man is having a hard time in the pen. When Suge received his current sentence, folks noticed something strange. Suge was watching his back. He even repeatedly told the judge that he was concerned for his safety while in jail. At the time, folks didn't read the meaning into these comments. But now those moves are starting to make sense. To truly comprehend what's happening to Suge while he's been locked down, we got to understand how this whole situation jumped off in the first place. One of the funniest stories I heard, Suge had an apartment full of producers. I guess they wasn't coming up with the right songs. He gathered them all up and said, "Look."
One of the funniest stories I heard, Suge had an apartment full of producers. I guess they wasn't coming up with the right songs. And he gathered them all up and said, "Look, either y'all start producing some hits or I'm gonna start producing some."
Suge wasn't just some random dude who got lucky in the music business. This man came straight out the hood, and he understood the streets in a way that most record executives never could and never would. The Death Row Records empire that Suge built wasn't just about making hits. It was about respect, loyalty, and making sure everybody knew that this wasn't some game. Under his leadership, Death Row became the most feared and respected label in all of hip-hop, launching careers that are still legendary today. We're talking about Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg, and of course, the one and only Tupac Shakur. Artists who didn't just make music, but also made movements. However, while Suge's reputation went deep in the streets, his legal problems went deeper. For years, the former Death Row CEO was accused of employing gang members and using strong arm tactics to enforce his will in the music industry. The accusations were wild. This wasn't no corporate boardroom type of negotiating. Suge was handling his business the hood way, and that meant sometimes things got physical real quick. The stories about how Suge operated became the stuff of legend in hip-hop circles. Cats would whisper about how he supposedly got Vanilla Ice to sign over his royalties. How he had beef with Puffy and Bad Boy Records that got so heated it contributed to the whole East Coast-West Coast war that ended up taking Pac and Biggie from us. These weren't just rumors floating around. These were the kind of stories that made other industry folks think twice before trying to play games with Death Row. Beyond the whispers and accusations within the music industry, Suge's legal troubles also involved probation and jail time. His journey through the system started way back in 1987 with domestic violence charges, then kept building up with molestation cases, probation violations, and a whole bunch of other situations that showed the law wasn't playing games when it came to Suge Knight. The pattern was clear as day. Every time Suge got into some beef, whether it was business-related or personal, it seemed like the situation would escalate beyond just words. In 1992, Knight pleaded no contest to molesting 2 rappers at a Hollywood recording studio, receiving 5 years probation. That conviction became the evil that returned to haunt him. The incident that really sealed Suge's fate happened in January 2015 outside Tam's Burgers in Compton, and this one was different because it ended with someone losing their life. Suge was accused of intentionally running over 2 men, Terry Carter and CL Bone Sloan, following an argument. One of the men died while the other was injured. The whole situation allegedly jumped off over some drama related to the Straight Outta Compton movie, with prosecutors saying Suge was angry about being left out of meetings and decisions about how his story was going to be told. Suge claimed he was just trying to defend himself, saying dudes were trying to set him up and he had to get out of there before things got worse. But while he had a lot of things to say in his defense, the surveillance footage told a different story. It showed what looked like Suge deliberately running down those men and not someone trying to escape from danger. The legal proceedings that followed stretched on for years, with Suge sitting in county jail fighting the case while his health started declining and his empire completely crumbled. During this time, whispers started spreading about what was happening to him behind bars, with some folks claiming he was getting targeted by other inmates and having all kinds of problems staying safe in lockup. When it finally came time for Suge to face the music in September 2018, Knight pleaded no contest. The plea deal took care of not just the hit and run case, but also some other charges, including robbery and making threats against the director of Straight Outta Compton. Now, this is where it gets crazy. Due to Suge's prior convictions from way back in 1987 and 1992, what should have been an 11-year sentence for manslaughter got doubled to 22 years. Then they added another 6 years for the third strike, plus 1 more year for using the truck as a deadly weapon. Final tally, 28 years in the pen with no chance of parole until October 2034, when Suge will be 69 years old. The courtroom scene when Suge got sentenced was heavy as hell. Terry Carter's family got up there and let Suge know exactly how they felt about what he did, calling him everything but a child of God and making it clear that they wanted him to pay for taking their loved one away from them. You could see the weight of it all hitting Suge as he realized he was about to spend what might be the rest of his life locked up. As they led Suge away to start his bid at R.J. Donovan Correctional Facility in San Diego, everybody started wondering the same thing. How is the man who used to run death row records going to survive in a place where your reputation from the outside might not mean much? A place where there's cats who might want to test you just to see if you're really about that life you claim to be about. The transition from being one of hip-hop's most feared executives to being just another inmate with a number was more than just a change of address. It was like watching an empire completely fall apart in real time. Suge went from controlling the careers of some of music's biggest legends to having every aspect of his daily life controlled by guards and prison rules. As Suge settled into doing his time, it became evident that the big question everyone was asking wasn't whether Suge would survive his sentence. It was whether he'd survive it in one piece, Suge's life behind bars. When Suge Knight first walked through them prison gates at R.J. Donovan Correctional Facility, it hit different than anything he'd ever experienced before. Here's a cat who spent decades having folks jump when he said jump. A boss who could make or break careers with a phone call. He's now just another number in the California Department of Correction system. Real talk, the adjustment from running death row records to doing hard time had to be one hell of a culture shock. Gone were the days of rolling up to the studio in luxury cars, throwing parties with the biggest names in entertainment, and having that aura of power that made grown men think twice before even looking at him wrong. Now it was count time, chow time, and lights out when they say so, not when Suge decided he was ready. What makes Suge's situation in the pen so interesting to folks on the outside isn't just that he's famous, but it's the whole unique set of circumstances that came with his reputation. Unlike some celebrity inmates who might be able to lay low and blend, and Suge's name carried weight in the streets long before he ever got locked up. And that kind of reputation travels fast through the prison system. The talks about what's been happening to Suge behind bars started spreading almost as soon as he got processed, and cats were talking about alleged incidents with other inmates, threats from rival gang members, as well as all other problems that come with being a high-profile prisoner. When you really dig into what's actually happening, the picture gets a lot more complicated. One thing that's been consistently reported and verified is how Suge's health has been declining since he got locked up. We're talking about serious medical problems that have folks wondering if the man who used to be this imposing physical presence is now dealing with vulnerabilities that could make him a target. The health situation got real serious real quick as he began losing weight. Homie dropped from over 350 pounds down to around 315 pounds. That's not the kind of weight loss you plan for. That's your body telling you something ain't right. Suge claimed it was due to untreated injuries, lack of insulin for his diabetes, and poor prison conditions. Even more concerning was when Suge had to be hospitalized for blood clots back in 2017. He blamed it on being kept in solitary confinement and not getting proper medical treatment. When you're talking about someone facing potentially life-threatening blood clots, that's way beyond just the normal wear and tear of doing time. It's a sign that something could be seriously wrong. What's fascinating about Suge's prison experience is how his past reputation both helps and hurts him at the same time. His connection to the Mob Peru Street gang, identified by police in 2008, meant he came into the system with certain affiliations that could provide protection. But when you look closely, you see that those same connections also paint a target on his back for rival gang members and anyone looking to settle old scores from his death row days. Prison politics is some complex stuff, and Suge's position in that whole ecosystem had to be tricky as hell. On one hand, his celebrity status can make him attractive to inmates trying to make a name for themselves. And on the other hand, his history of violence and intimidation means he can't just rely on his reputation to keep him safe in a place where reputations get tested every single day. One of the realest insights into how Suge has been handling his time comes from a prison interview where he broke down the harsh realities of the system and tried to drop some knowledge on young cats who might be headed down the same path. The interview gives you a rare look at how Suge sees his situation and what he hopes other people can learn from his mistakes.
A lot of kids saying they get their input off of rap music or rap artists or entertainment. I think some of that could be true, but most of it, I would like them to understand that basically all the artists who's involved, and if they get in trouble, these guys have record companies backing that will get them high-powered lawyers.
That right there shows Suge understands how the game really works. How the system treats cats from the hood different than it treats celebrities with money and connections. He's basically telling young dudes not to get it twisted, thinking they're going to get the same treatment as their favorite rappers if they get jammed up. Suge's comments about snitching and cooperation with law enforcement also give you insight into the code that governs both street life and prison culture.
He got caught with guns, and each time it's nothing. They're not gonna violate him, because for the street guys know what I'm talking about. There's no puzzle. I mean, if you get a guy that constantly getting in trouble and never gonna come to prison, that's because he's an informant, he's a rat, a snitch, you know. And they're more important to the police on the streets than in here, because they let them know what's going on.
This perspective shows how Suge is trying to navigate his time behind bars while staying away from further attacks. What's really interesting is how similar Suge's prison experience is to that of other high-profile inmates who've done time. Just like Suge, cats like R. Kelly, Bill Cosby, and others have faced well-publicized incidents and attacks during their bids. This shows how crazy prison life can be for these guys. For Suge in particular, the combination of his declining health, the reality of doing 28 years, as well as the psychological weight of being locked up can definitely take a toll on the former death row boss. Suge has been consistently trying to appeal his conviction and sentence, with his legal team arguing that his rights got violated during the original proceedings. In 2023, Suge attempted to overturn his sentence, claiming he was denied the right to represent himself and also received inadequate legal counsel. His appeal was unsuccessful as judges told him his petitions were too late and didn't have merit. His failure of these appeals pretty much sealed Suge's fate, making it clear that he's going to be locked up well into his senior citizen years. In March 2025, Judge Laura F. Priver denied his writ of habeas corpus, calling it untimely and insincere, basically closing the door on any hope Suge had for getting out early or getting his sentence reduced. As Suge continues doing his bid, the reality of his situation becomes clearer and clearer. The former record executive is going to be spending a lot of years behind bars. And he will do so while navigating the dangers of prison life, especially for someone whose past moves has created enemies all over the place. So the big question is, what lies ahead for Suge Knight in prison? The unpredictable dangers ahead. All right, let's cut through all the noise and keep it 100 about the dangers that could be in store for Suge Knight behind bars. Suge himself has given us the most authentic insight into what his prison experience has really been like and how he sees the whole criminal justice system. In various interviews and statements he's made while locked up, he's been remarkably real about what prison life entails and what determines whether an inmate stays safe or becomes a target.
I know I was going to have to pay a debt to society before it's coming to prison, because if you come from the inner city, you come from the ghetto, and you act up off that block, you'll come to prison sooner or later.
That statement right there shows Suge is already having a hard time in there. And now that reports of attacks have emerged, it's unclear what we can expect in the future. The reason these attack claims are disturbing is because of Suge's reputation as one of hip-hop's most feared OGs. Such reputation raises an expectation of violence that follows him everywhere, even into prison. Suge has been a controversial figure in the hip-hop industry with a reputation for using intimidation and violence in his business dealings. He used the threat of violence as a business strategy, creating for himself a reputation of fear. And that reputation was further solidified through his involvement in some of hip-hop's most dramatic beefs and conflicts. Suge Knight's name has been tied to the murders of Tupac Shakur and the Notorious Big, even though he's never been charged in either case. The theories around these cases have kept Suge's name in the streets and in people's minds, even long after Death Row Records collapsed.
I ain't never in my life told. You know, I'm the mother when people ask me if I know who killed Tupac, and not saying Tupac dead or alive, but I'm saying if they ask me if I know who killed Tupac, I'm the said, hey, absolutely not.
But despite his denials, the speculation keeps going, fueled by books like Murder Rap by Greg Kading, which alleged that Suge hired Wardell Poochie F.A. to kill Biggie. It also alleged that associates of Bad Boy Records offered a bounty for Shakur's death. Suge Knight is one of the most controversial figures in the history of hip-hop, and he has had many feuds he's had with artists, executives, and even record labels. One of Suge Knight's most famous beefs was with Dr. Dre, his former friend and business partner. In the early 1990s, Suge helped Dre leave Ruthless Records and start Death Row Records. At first, they were a strong team. Dre produced huge albums like The Chronic, which helped make Death Row a major force in rap. But over time, their relationship broke down. Dr. Dre didn't like how violent and chaotic the label had become under Suge's leadership. He also didn't agree with Suge's growing friendship with Tupac Shakur and the way Suge seemed to encourage conflict in the music industry. By 1996, Dre left Death Row to start his own label, Aftermath Entertainment. Suge didn't take this lightly. He called Dre a traitor and made fun of him in interviews. Tupac, who was close to Suge at the time, also joined in and dissed Dre in songs like Toss It Up and To Live and Die in L.A. But while things with Dre were falling apart, Suge was also starting an even more dangerous rivalry with another rising mogul from the East Coast, Sean Diddy Combs. Suge Knight and Sean Diddy Combs had a dangerous and deadly rivalry in the 1990s. Suge accused Diddy of being behind the East Coast versus West Coast beef that was heating up at the time. Suge also believed that Diddy's artist, the Notorious Big, had something to do with the 1994 shooting of Tupac in New York. The beef got worse in 1995 when Suge went on stage at the Source Awards and took a shot at Diddy. His comment was a direct diss aimed at Diddy, who was known for appearing in his artist music videos. As the East Coast beef raged on, Suge's issues didn't stop there. He even ended up turning against one of his own, Snoop Dogg. At one point, Snoop Dogg was one of Death Row's biggest stars. He released the classic album Doggy Style under the label and became a key figure in West Coast rap. But after Tupac died and Suge went to jail for parole violations, things started falling apart at Death Row. Snoop felt like Suge was trying to control him, and he didn't feel safe anymore. In 1998, Snoop left Death Row and signed with Master P's No Limit Records. Suge took this as a betrayal and began dissing Snoop in interviews and courtrooms. He even accused Snoop of being a snitch and working with the police. And besides,